Good morning and welcome to another episode of A Contagious Smile, where every smile tells a story. I have my CRPS sister here with me, Allison. I'm so excited to have her. She has been on my list for a good little minute because nobody understands how CRPS feels unless, God forbid, you're dealing with it on a daily basis. And to read about her and learn about her and then get her to come on and talk to you guys is just an absolute blessing. Not only does she unfortunately have CRPS, she's an author and a keynote speaker and a consultant and a guru in this area. And I am just so excited because we're all going to be so blessed by having this conversation with her. Thank you so much, Allison, for
Oh,
being here.
you are awesome. And I'm so excited about our conversation and sharing and your story is just, I feel even more inspired hearing what you've gone through and how you're showing up and serving others with it. It's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So you have CRPS from a surgery, and so your experience since then has been almost debilitating because that's what we go through, and people don't get it because they don't live it. And I'm glad they don't get it, but they shouldn't be so judgmental because they don't get it. It's like I wouldn't tell a podiatrist how to do something on their foot, and they shouldn't tell a neurologist how to do something on the brain. Like it's
Right.
just right. So, what has your experience been with the whole CRPS?
Well, it's interesting because your title of A Contagious Smile is because we never know what's going on behind people's smile. And so often people who have neuropathic pain are suffering and nobody knows it's happening. We can put on the brave face, we can show up and then collapse behind the scenes. Like yesterday, I was, I'm going to admit this, 11:30, I was done working and I slept right through on the couch and just had to do what my body needed yesterday from 11:30 in the morning onward. And then I actually had a podcast interview in India that was live, so like at midnight. So I got back up and then did that and put on the smile and did the whole work that I do and then went back to bed.
Mhm.
So the only reason I can do that though and still have my business and not have that I didn't ultimately end up going on disability like the doctors had suggested to me was because I have gotten so streamlined in how I do my work. I am so absolutely focused when I am working and I take breaks and I build it in and I'm hyper strategic about doing the work that I need to get done and nurturing and giving myself the space and the grace for my body to go through what it's going through for the last 17 years.
So, yours was 17 years ago. Mine was, my abuse was 17 years ago.
You and I were in the middle of it. Like, and it's a long time. But, and it's interesting. People say time heals all wounds. No, it doesn't. It just makes it easier to deal with the suckage,
Right.
right? Like, and, but what I think time has done is given me perspective. I am able to feel my pain. I go into my pain. I don't try to deny it. I have made friends with it. I don't fight it anymore. Like, and that didn't happen in the first 5 years, right? Like that takes a lot of discipline and self-development and exploration and just figuring out what is the best way for me to operate and still reach my dreams and my goals and my overall vision and purpose for my life while having physical limitations.
Let me ask you, do you ever have those moments, which I really hope you don't, where I will literally be doing something so small and literally I'm like on my knees. I'm like, oh, it's just brutal. And my daughter will say, are you hurting? I'm like, if I never complain about hurting ever. And I'm like, it's okay, just give me a minute. And it literally just stops you where you are for whatever period of time where it just gets intense more than normal. And then it kind of just calms down for a minute.
Of course, right? And it's like I always describe my pain as like being a serrated edge knife, kind of going
Yes. It just
right.
turns. And once in a
Yeah,
while, it's a live nerve, and
yeah,
metaphorically, you're just on your knees. It's just, it'll stop you in your tracks.
right. And I remember early in the days, nobody knew. So I used to be, when this happened, my surgery happened, I was in the media, I was running for political office. I was And, the universe is a funny thing because it has a way of correcting us when we're on not a great path, I think. And unfortunately, this was my big correction. But I had a Post-it note on my mirror that said, deserve to hit the pillow. And what that meant for me was that if I didn't think I'd contributed enough to other people's lives, if I hadn't done enough for the community, if I hadn't, felt like I deserved a rest called sleep,
Right.
I had to go back to my office, make an introduction, do a phone call for somebody, do something to help someone else before I was like, okay, now I can go to bed. And I was making other really like not great life choices, like maybe with the men I was attracting into my life. Like it just wasn't a really great, like I look back, I was very happy. I was floating around. I was in the media. I was doing all these things. But if I look at it from, many years later, that perspective lens, I can see that I wasn't fulfilled. I wasn't on a path that was going to serve my soul over the years. And so I went in for the surgery. It should have been like just a few minutes. It was no big deal.
Right.
And things went wrong. And of course there was, all the follow-up, 5 surgeries to try to fix the first damage from the first. And that process, but I would go out. I was still in the media, right? Like I would go to an event and just like put on this smile. And I was, hosting this networking event. And there were 70 women who were at it and all these professional women. And I was co-hosting with a friend of mine. And another friend came in and she came up to me and she looked me in the eye. She goes, Ellie, are you okay? And I'm like, I'm great.
Right. And inside I'm burning. It's burning tears internally.
Yeah. And she said, okay. And she said, oh, I think everybody, let's move the party down to the restaurant. I know some of you got to go. She literally cleared out the room. And the second the last guest went out, I fell on the floor and they couldn't get me upstairs, right? Like we had to sit there like 4 hours. And I think every one of us who goes through tough times has had those times behind the scenes where we look great out in public and we do this. And it's not that we're being fake out in public, because I got to tell you, like when I'm doing what I'm doing, like even like right now, I feel so in flow and so blessed. And there's nowhere I want to be other than right here. And the fact that my body's in pain is like this add-on that is just infiltrates everything. And I feel like, a long time ago, I decided I can do something that I want to do and be in pain, or I can sit on the couch and I can be in pain.
Right.
And it doesn't mean I don't have those days like yesterday where I was beyond myself. But for most of the time, I do my best to be like, okay, yeah, I'm in a lot of pain right now. And here's the thing I'm going to do. And I'm very, very careful not to overextend myself, not to take meetings that I don't want to take. I work with clients who I love. Like and there are pieces of my job as a keynote speaker. Like COVID was in so many ways a blessing because I could be at home.
Yeah.
And do virtual. I didn't have to do the airports and the long drives because driving is the hardest thing for me, still is. But now I've got to put new strategies in place as I start getting back out and, just doing more and more in person. I've got to like reevaluate and also accommodate for that recovery time.
Right. It's brutal. It is absolutely brutal. So you also, not only do you suffer from the chronic nerve pain, but you also have this grief from it. But what I had learned with you is that you are kind of described by your patients as like this tough love wrapped up in an empathetic hug. And I love that because I can already see it. I can totally already see that. But why do you think they feel that way?
Because I'm never going to BS you. I don't know what our square, you're
fine. You're fine.
I'm going to give you the straight goods and I'm going to call you on it. And yet I'm going to see you and your humanness and your vulnerability. And the truth of the matter is that when we go through tough times in life, it sucks. Yes. And people who pretend that, we're going to be power of positive thinking and I'm just going to be like pretending I'm not in pain and really just like going over here to magic fairy dust and rainbows and unicorns, right? Are doing such a disservice to those who are truly experiencing challenges in their life. Because if you're like in so much pain and you're going, I'm not in pain, I'm not in pain, I feel great, look at
Right.
me,
Yeah.
right? Your inner voice is going, yeah, bullshit. Like,
Right? Yes.
you're
Yes.
in pain.
Mm-hmm.
And so my goal is always, when it comes to storylines, because I believe that that's a big part of what creates destructive stress, is like, I just want to neutralize them, right? Like, I used to, when I was in recovery mode, I would beat myself up. Allison, you're so lazy. What's wrong with you? You get up, you got to do this. And, people think that you're so successful and you're doing all this stuff. And here you are on the couch watching a movie in the middle of the afternoon. And I would like just hate on myself.
Yeah.
And you know what happens is it's like, it's just one more punch on the internal game. And it adds to and adds to. And the more my destructive stress gets out of hand, the higher my pain goes.
Yes.
Do you notice that?
I do. I do. I do.
Yeah.
My husband gives me such amount of grief because I work 20 hours a day, literally 7 days a week. I haven't had a day off. I just, if I have someone reach out to me and they're in a situation, I try to help them in an escape plan. I try to help them find, shelter, and I stay with them every step of the way. They won't get somebody different every time they reach out. They're going to get me, and I will be with them every step of the way, and then their family, and then I stay with them. And that is so important to me. And like, I feel guilty if I can't even tell you last time I got to watch TV. Like, I just don't. And I lay down with my husband every night when he goes to bed. And then as soon as he goes to sleep, I'm working. And then I get up. And then I get up with him every morning at 4:30 and I'm working. And it's literally like, he's like, babe, could you please? I'm like, no, I have to. I have to. And and now, especially because it takes me like 10 times longer to do things than I ever did before because I'm having to do them one handed. Like, you have to learn how to redo life, everything from
Oh,
washing your hair. I've told my husband, I was like, I want to shave my head because this is ridiculous. And he's like, no. And I'm like, and he's like, I'll tie your shoes. No, I'm going to learn to tie my shoes. I'm going to do it by myself. And he's like, babe, you can't stir the pot and hold the handle. I will figure out a way,
yeah, you
or
will.
how do you open a jar? I will do it. Just let me do it. Don't let me do it. Don't give me sympathy. Don't give me whatever. I will do it. And like, what was so ironic, and I wish I taped my surgeon. He asked me because we've had so many surgeries together. When I went back for the last one, I had hundreds and hundreds of stitches, and I go in there, and he doesn't have the gentlest hand when it comes to stitch removal. And for every one stitch, he has three in place. So it's like a really big deal. And when I went in, he goes, I want to know how you can take your own stitches out one handed. Like, I want to know how you do it. And I said, well, he goes, I can't take stitches out one handed. So how are you doing it? Because, you have to get the thing to pull them up and cut them and pull it out. And I was like, he goes, don't show me. So then the next time I came in, he's like, I've tried to figure out how you did this. Like, I took the tools and everything, and I can't figure out how you do it. And I was like, it's determination. You just have to figure out how to work with what you have and make it happen. And it takes a long time. Sometimes it's very frustrating, but if you're determined enough, you can make it happen. And he's like, I want to see this one day. And I was like, all right, just whatever. But you just have to not give up. I mean, if someone says you can't do it, I'm going to say, watch me, and I'm going to learn, and I'm going to do it. But it might take me forever, and I get really frustrated, but it is. And like, one of your superpowers is seeing patterns in people's behavior. So I'm going to put myself on the chopping block here and ask
Yeah.
you what patterns you see with me, as I'm like nervous to hear.
Well, I like to create patterns to create frameworks so that people can figure out their life, right?
Okay.
So, whereas I have, like, you'll also notice I have a judgment-free zone.
Right.
So I don't, when you share with me your story, it would be very different from I'm just absorbing your story, as opposed to like if you and I were working together and I'd be like, okay, so tell me why you need to work 20 hours a week or a day.
A day, right, right.
Yeah. And like, is that because you're feeling obligated to, or is it because you want to and you're driven and it's the only way you can really disguise and release your pain, right? Like, it's there are many
She's
ways.
good.
Or is it just you?
You're
Right?
just
Yeah. And so, we can explore all of that, but what I find really interesting is, like, oh gosh, so many things here with what you just brought up, but like, it's so easy to forget who you are without the pain. I became like, I would go to a party. This is early days, but like I would go to a party with my friends and I'd be in so much pain I couldn't stop talking about it. And so I ultimately, now I'm getting more communicative about it because I want, because my pain is actually firing up and going in many, many different directions, and things are getting quite out of hand these days, compared to my original pain. But there's so many layers of pain that often happen, right? If you have other things that can trigger autoimmune, it can trigger, anyway, we've all been there, right? And so I will just have one line with each of my friends. So I don't need, they can validate me. Like, I think it's so important for those, because nobody can see what's happening in your life. And even if you're in a domestic violence situation, right? Like if your bruises are hidden, nobody knows.
That's right.
Perhaps. And it can be all consuming for you because you're not being validated or feeling validated on the outside by the outside world, because you're going through this thing all alone that nobody else can feel. Now, I remember a guy who's, he was a vice president of a company, and he's like, Ali, he says, everybody is like, doesn't get it. They don't understand how exhausted I am, because he has like TMJ in his, like that, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, they don't understand how hard it is. And I'm like, but do you want them to understand? Like, do you really want your kids to truly understand what you're going through?
Right.
And it was so much of his thing. And we had to work to get his identity back of who are you without the pain? Because now it's like, can I go to dinner and not bring up my pain?
Yes. Right. And it's crucial because it's here, and you chew just for a little while and then you're just like, oh, I can't anymore.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's clicking, and you hear the clicking, and the person next to you hears the clicking. Like, are you okay? And you're like, yeah, I'm good. Like, I always try to, like I told you before, I always try to make people laugh, but I'm like, oh, I just need WD-40, I'm good.
It would work, right? I'm like, I think I have some. I saw some this morning in my laundry room. So let me just give you a squirt.
Yes, we're here and everywhere else.
But, I think that it's like we're so much more than our pain, right? We still have ideas. It might be harder to find those ideas because it's harder to get the clarity. But when you learn those skills, you can be like, all right, what am I going to do with what I have today? Right. And in the early days, when I had 2 to 5 hours of functionality a day, I had to be and I was talking about that at the very beginning, right? When we first started talking, I got so good at productivity and managing my personal capacity, right? Like, that's why now, like, companies hire me to come in and talk about how do we lower stress, not from a perspective of, you need to exercise and meditate and all of that, which is all like really great things, but right. Your capacity management, we only have so much to do, to think, to feel, to be each and every day. And when you have chronic pain, when you're going through real adversity, if it's violence or something behind the scenes, or you're grieving somebody you love, or somebody has a cancer diagnosis in your life. Recently my mom was in hospital for 8.5 weeks with a head trauma. And so I was caring for her, but like, I actually grew my business during that time. And it was interesting because my pain was high. My capacity was limited because I was going back and forth to the hospital, driving, which increases the pain. But because I had to apply all of my techniques to get through it, right, I was actually more productive. And it's like, it can be our superpower. It can be like, and some days it's like, what is the 5-minute task I can do today to move my business forward? What's the 3 things that need to happen? And then looking at all of the different things in life and figuring out and getting really crystal clear what aggravates my emotional state, what aggravates my negative storyline, what brings out my complainer, right? Like, knowing what those are so that we can look at them and go and objectively strategize and figure out what is a better way for me to approach that so that I can mitigate and lower how intense it gets the next time I go through that.
Right. How do you yourself manage to go through your pain while you're doing things like working and just everyday life.
Okay, are you ready for my Smurf analogy?
I love Smurf analogies.
Because there are, just so plenty of them out there in the world.
I love it.
Okay, so you remember the Smurfs. Not everybody's old enough probably to remember the Smurfs, but remember Grumpy Smurf?
Of course
And he was always grumpy,
yeah,
right?
Right.
So my central nerve place, right, where everything sort of began, I think of it as Grumpy Smurf is
I love
here,
it.
and he's like, mm. And if I go to Grumpy Smurf and I get angry at him and I start like denying him and trying to beat him away and pissed off and just like resentful and like, you're like, get away from me, then what Grumpy Smurf does is he calls the rest of the village and he says, everybody help me hang on. And what happens is then I've got the entire Smurfy village hanging onto my body going,
and you're like, I'm calling Gargamel. It's happening.
Right, I'm calling them all. And they're just like all there. And so instead, if I say to Grumpy Smurf, I say, Grumpy, there you are, bugger. I really don't like you. I really don't like you, but I get that you're there. And one day I'll understand why you're there. And I know one day you're going to let go. And I believe that. But right now, you and I are going to coexist. So how about you let everybody else go away? And you don't have to bring them to the party. And I know this sounds ridiculous, but it's how I visualize it to try to de-escalate the pain.
Yes.
And so I consider this my make friends with the pain analogy. And so I have recognized that. But the other thing is that I'm constantly checking in on my pain levels. So before I go into a podcast, before I go into a keynote speech or, onto TV or anywhere, right? Like I check in, where's my pain at? Even if it's just a client meeting. Mm-hmm. And I go, okay, right now it's a 4. Or I'm like, God, that's great. I have no risk. Oh, right now it's like a 9. Okay, so that's going to put me at risk for PANGRI, which is pain-induced anger and irritability. And so I know that if somebody says something to me, I need to be extra cautious about how I'm going to respond, because if I allow the pain to drive the bus, I am not going to do my best work. And so that constant self-awareness is critical. Mm-hmm. And then the other way that I lower the pain or manage the pain while I'm working is, do we have time for another analogy?
Sure. Yeah.
Can I give you one more?
Absolutely.
All right. So we got the Grumpy Smurf, right?
Yes. I love Grumpy. I love this. I love that.
Now we've got the ice cube that became the snowman.
Okay.
So in our businesses, our lives, our families, we have a whole bunch of things that we need to do. And I'm going to ask you to imagine those are ice cubes.
Okay.
Some of them are small, some of them are big.
All right.
And we need to melt those ice cubes as efficiently and effectively as possible. And when we've melted all the ice cubes that are required for that day, then we are done our work and we can go and we can do whatever we want to do.
Right.
Okay. But as part of the human experience, we don't just melt ice cubes. We also have access to this huge mound of snow that is represented by the misplaced emotion, the negative storylines, and barriers to performance like judgment and complaining and blaming and resentment and all of those icky emotions that make us feel really heavy, or activities. I don't even know if they're emotions. They might be. Some of them. And so what happens is, let's say you're at work and you have to write a report. Actually, this is a fun story. A friend of mine, vice president, international firm, we sit down for lunch and I'm like, how are you doing? How's work going? She goes, awful. I'm like, oh my gosh, tell me what's going on. And she's like, head office has sent down this directive for this new report, and they don't get it. They don't understand how much pressure I'm on, how hard it is on the ground, how bad the economy, like all of these different things that she was laying off. And I said, gosh, when did they want you to do that report? She's like, 3 weeks ago. And I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. So this must be like a really big report. Like, how long is it going to take you? He looks, leans back, she says, 15 minutes. And I'm like, it was a 15-minute report and you spent 3 weeks being bitter, angry, resentful, procrastinating, etc. And I know I'm looking at your eyes and you're like, what would she do? Just do 15-minute report. This sort of thing happens all the time, right? Because she was resentful towards the head office because they weren't providing enough resources. And that's legitimate. But it's not about the report. It's about, you got to address that separately.
Right.
But we take it out, this misplaced emotion, out on the ice cube that needs to get done, right? Leaving the hospital, and you have, I remember mom was in the hospital, my dad had already passed away, and I was just like really scared because her heart was not working well. And I was afraid I was going to lose her. And I got out to the parking garage and my credit card wasn't working. So for whatever reason, it wouldn't work. I couldn't get out. And I was an absolute biatch to the parking lot attendant. This is before I had all my understanding and my work, right?
Yeah.
We've all been there. We take it out on them. We see it all the time, especially with the pandemic. It's like grocery store lineup, somebody being rude to the person, right? I ended up going back and apologizing to that person when I left. It was actually a really pivotal moment in my life where I realized I'm so afraid about my mom that the feeling I'm having is anger. And because I haven't articulated that and I'm not self-aware, I've taken it out on an innocent bystander. So this is our first layer of our snowman. And then we add in negative storyline. Nobody's going to read this report anyway. These people are idiots. Why do they need this report? There's another layer of the snowman. And then we add on the procrastination, the barriers to performance, the worrying about it, the judging yourself, I can't believe I've waited 3 weeks to do that report. And so now we have all of these 3 layers of snow wrapped around the initial ice cube.
Do you have Grumpy and Olaf?
Yeah, there you go. Oh my God, I never even thought about that. I'll add that in.
I love that. Can you just imagine?
I'm such a visual person. These are the patterns that I see, right? And so we've got this, but the ice cube is the only thing that really needed to be melted. But now, because you've added on the misplaced emotion, the negative storyline, and the barriers to performance, you have to melt the whole snowman. And when you think about that with everything that you have to do, you're just consuming and making life harder than it needs to be. And so to your original question, how do I deal with the pain and still do the work? Every time I notice I'm building a snowman, I use my frameworks to blast through the snow so I can focus on just melting the ice cubes and keeping the business and my world alive.
You should play in the background Olaf singing "Do You Want to Build a Snowman?"
And please don't. Can anybody interpret him? We could have him change the lyrics to "Don't build a snowman" because it's going to be harder to melt.
Right? Love it.
These are the things that go through my mind to keep me functioning and showing up the best I can for my clients, and hopefully inspiring, people and helping people know that they're not alone, that they are seen, their pain is valid, their circumstances are valid, and it doesn't need to define who you are and what you achieve.
Right. I would love to have you come on with a Contagious Smile and do workshops and classes and things like that to help all of our CRPS family members.
Oh my God, I would love to.
Because
I would absolutely love to.
Nobody has that resource, it's all like, we go in there and we feel like we're just an insurance number, it's like, okay, next. And here we have such issues like, if you go on disability, you're not allowed to make but a certain amount of money. You're not allowed to whatever. And if you do, you lose it. And then you have to go and reapply, and it takes years, and you have to appeal it. And it's such a big headache. It's like they want you to live the most miserable life in every way possible, and it's ridiculous. And then they don't give you the tools. They don't offer you anything. It's like, oh, okay, oh, you don't want narcotics, you don't want this, you don't want that. Well, all right, bye. But we'll see
Yeah.
you coming up soon. We're gonna, insure it as a, complex visit, whatever. That's it. That's what
So,
happens.
and you know what? I think there are some policy changes that need to happen. I don't know a lot about that, but I do recognize, and that was one of my biggest fears. Like, I remember when that doctor was saying to me, look, Allison, you have to reevaluate your expectations for your life. Your pain is never going away, and you're going to be on pain medication for the rest of your life. So it's time we talk about you going on disability. And in that moment of desperation, like, I knew I couldn't do it. I didn't have a backup plan. I don't have a husband, right? Like, not that any, not that having a husband could be a thing, but I didn't have, some wealthy family or rich,
Right.
uncle from a faraway land who was going to give me money to pay my life, right? And
Right.
I also had a huge passion for what I was going to do, right? Like,
You can't live on that amount of disability. It's
no,
impossible.
it is
Possible.
impossible. It is. So I knew I needed to find a different way. And then I got so frustrated with the advice they give you, because they say things like, pace yourself. Have you been told to pace yourself? And
Oh, yeah.
you're like, you know what? The last time I checked, the pacer car is not winning the trophy.
Right.
And so what you're telling me to do is to give up on my life.
Right. You know who's driving the Pacer car? It's Grumpy. Grumpy Smith. Smurf is in the lead because no one else has started yet.
That's right. So it's like, I don't want to pace. I want to come to this world with all of my, everything I have to offer. And I don't want to be defined by my pain. Like, this is probably the biggest public conversation I've had about my pain. Not, I've probably done like a couple speeches on it over the years. And at one point, and I have an entire book like mapped out, and I help my clients often come to me for two reasons. Number one, they're really successful and they're suffocating on their success. They typically either have pain or ADHD. So,
What's the name of it?
and it's just that's my world, right? And so I end up sharing these and testing these ideas. So I would love to share them with your group if that's helpful in any way. I'm here
Love
to
it.
serve.
Absolutely. What is the name of your book?
Which one? I have several.
Uh,
So
Give them
yeah.
all.
Okay. So first one was Business Cards to Business Relationships, Personal Branding and Profitable Networking Made Easy. The first version of that book actually is what got me through my original thing.
Ah, yeah.
So yeah, anyway, that's old. And then I wrote a book, and somebody's going to be irritated by this title, so I'm going to apologize, but I love it. Married my mom, birthed a dog, how to be resilient when life sucks.
Oh,
I love it. But here's the thing, when you read the book, you get it. But so many people, like, because I work a lot in the corporate market, like teaching stress and all of
yeah.
that. And corporate market couldn't understand married my mom, birthed the dog. But when one of my strategies, because I wasn't someone who was going to ask for help, but when I had to get strategic about how I was going to fix my life, I actually called my mom. And I said, look, why don't you, like, I know you're adjusting to life after dad died, but you could move to the city and you could we could hang out and we'd have so much fun. And like, you could drive me to all my gigs in Toronto, and, you could take care of my house. And on the nights when I can't get up because I'm in so much pain, you can turn off the lights. And, like she came to the city and she lived with me, and then like, I wouldn't have been able to make it through without her, right? Like, I wouldn't have. She was incredible. And then it became this joke, because mom would be like, well, what time are you going to be home, and what do you want for dinner? Like, I'd be out with a friend for coffee or something, and they'd be like, have the exact same conversation with their husband, right? I'd be like, oh my God, I've married my mom.
I'm so envious because I went through all this and I had no one, and my biological parents and I had not spoken in forever. They learned I went through an amputation and they didn't even reach out, nothing. So
Yeah.
I wish, but
I recognize the blessing I have in that, and I'm grateful every day. And now we've switched roles. Like I'm more independent, but she's had some health challenges, so she's still alongside me, and we're a great team. And then of course, birthed a dog, my little Winston. He's I realize he's not a real child, but
he's your
he
child.
is
You're a
like
doggy
it,
mom.
right? And, I spent my 30s, sure, I wanted to have kids, but I spent them trying to survive and, with my business and the limited capacity. And this is where I am in life. So there we go.
Well, welcome to the family because we're keeping you.
Thank you.
So we
Thank
always
you.
ask everybody to give us one of their favorite quotes before we head off and tell everybody where they can find you as well.
Okay, so number one favorite quote would be, when opportunity presents itself, talk yourself in, don't talk yourself out.
I like it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes that means talking yourself out of a bad opportunity.
That's true.
Right? But yeah, don't be afraid to take those leaps of faith. And in terms of where to find me, let's do this. Let's go AlisonGraham.com/smile. Okay, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to put together a few little goodies for your community.
Aww.
And I will make it your page. So AlisonGraham.com/smile. And they can, like, I have a weekly lift up, and my other books, like Take Back Your Weekend, which is all about productivity. And then the new one, The Stress Illusion, that will be coming out. We can talk about it another time.
Yes.
Well, like, you can get information on that, but like also just like tons of free resources. I have videos, I have, like so much stuff. So let's do that.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, I'm so excited. Thank you so much for being here, and we will have you back.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.